children will listen, not just to our words, or we'd all be a little more off the hook. They will be full-bodied listeners to the words, the body language, the actions that speak volumes, too, about what it means to be in relationship to someone that you love. And they will learn from those moments all the lessons about themselves, true or not, but at the moment that seem true to them. And important will be a responsive caregiver who provides food when they're hungry and sleep when they're tired and healthy touch and safety. But part of how a caregiver does any of that, and even more fundamentally important to children's overall sense of well-being and growing sense of their own self-esteem and value, and even their fundamental ability to emotionally self-regulate, is that they have a caregiver who is a responsive listener. Through words and tone, body language and eye contact, and their ability to reflect back the child's reality. Through all of these modes, the parent communicates, I see you, I hear you, you matter. Good listening, it does all of that. And it's not just good for children. Thich Nhat Hanh says that, quote, the roots of a lasting relationship are mindfulness, deep listening, and loving speech. And they all happen in an experience of listening, the full sense of it. We all need someone well beyond childhood throughout our lives, different people maybe who remind us of what I hope we have learned to come to believe about ourselves and know, that we are worthy, that we are lovable, someone who hears, reflects back the experience of our lives and of the world as we name it, helps us manage the impact of our emotions and navigate choices, people who communicate these same truths, the ones a child needs to know. I see you, I hear you, you are worthy. You matter to me. By contrast, a study done of couples newly together that videotaped them just in conversation with each other and then noted every word or behavior that they saw, and then later found which couples didn't survive and correlated all these factors. Some of you may remember this. Found the number one factor that was shown in the first videos that could predict whether the relationship survived. And it wasn't name calling, and it wasn't signs of anger or even passive aggression. It was eye rolling. That gesture that says loudly, I have no respect for what you're saying or doing right now. I actually don't even want to be here with you. The very opposite of mindfulness and loving speech and listening, the opposite of you matter. And though you and I may not always agree with a friend or a lover or a child, their mattering is not up for grabs. It shouldn't be. And so our listening has to speak to that mattering. And that isn't easy some days, but neither is cooking a souffle or shooting a 3-point shot or doing your taxes. And we figure out how to do some or all of those things. So you and I, we have to strap on our growth mindset, and we set to a life that is about improving how we listen, because listening matters to those we love most. Gary Drevich, in a January 2021 article called The Gift of Deep Listening that we read something from this morning in Psychology Today, he describes an experience of his being listened to in his childhood by his mother, and I want to share it with you. Drevich writes, When I was a child, I told my mother all manner of things. What I thought about the color green, the dream I had of the big volcano, my most outlandish ideas, including the plan to build a hot air balloon with my best friend and circumnavigate the globe together. Often when something was important to me, even ridiculous from an adult's perspective, she would pause whatever she was doing. We'd sit on the kitchen stools and she would listen to what I had to say. Her presence was full and felt, notable in what was absent. She didn't interrupt, correct, lecture, or give advice. She allowed long silences while I gathered myself. Occasionally, she took notes and gave them to me in case I wanted to think things over later. Sometimes she asked questions or reflected back something I said, but mostly she listened. Drevitch, it seems, was born with a master listener, a master teacher of listening in his own home. And I want to use his description because it gives us some great clues about what are, in fact, the fundamentals of good listening. So let's unpack it a little bit together. One thing that struck me in that description was how Drevitch's mother would get herself situated to listen, even if she wasn't expecting it, how she'd pause what she was doing, sometimes sit on a stool, he says, when he started sharing. And I know you and I can't always pause and get ourselves situated for listening, but if we can, it's a great scene-setting move. I suggest, as many of you I'm sure do, shutting off your cell phones as soon as it's clear that something important is being said, or just the need for connection. I actually regularly ask for a minute if I need it so I can get a glass of water or turn on the laundry or do the text that I know I need to do to tell someone that I am going to be delayed, let's say, to call them back. Do what I need to do to be able to listen the way I want to say, I want to pay attention. Can you give me 30 seconds to do something so I can be present, so I can listen? The second thing his mom does that we talked a little bit about today in other stories is that she doesn't interrupt. Not easy to practice that commitment to not interrupt. Do you know that most people are uncomfortable with silence that can last less than 10 seconds before they feel the urge to ask a question or say something to break the silence? And there are so many things that make interrupting appealing. I mean, I don't know about you, but there are like all the thoughts that pop into my monkey mind. My favorite being a chore that I'm wondering about. Like, hey, did you take out the garbage yet? Or the ubiquitous buzz of a messaging app that's begging to be heard and responded to, listened and read. We had the majority of the staff this fall take a test to find out their Enneagram. And it was a fun way to be in conversation about our different styles and orientations. But my write-up said at one point, you get very upset when you're interrupted, especially while sharing something that is important to you. And all I could think of, does anyone not get upset when they're interrupted sharing something that's important to them? But to be fair to all of us, sometimes when we interrupt, we do it in that effort to try and make a connection, to add a parallel story to our own lives. But it doesn't always land, I realize, the way we mean it to. Rachel Naomi Remen, in her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, writes how, quote, one of my patients told me that when she tried to tell her story, people often interrupted her to tell her that they had once had something just like that happen to them. Subtly for her, her pain became a story about themselves, and eventually she stopped talking to people, just like the bear in our story. The truth is that really listening to someone's story is probably connecting enough. I think of a therapist I had for many years who I adored, who only twice in all those years told me something about her own life. And it was important when she did, but it made me realize how it must have been 100 times at least she was sitting there with a parallel experience, not naming it, but bringing all of the compassion and empathy and understanding and wondering to how she held me in that time. So good listening involves the really hard business of trying not to interrupt and even sitting in silence, which apparently we all find really hard to do. But what to say? What can we say? What do we say when others are sharing? How do we, who want to be good listeners, how do we let folks know we're listening? Well, the most basic pastoral care and counseling classes that I've taken usually just say, and many of you probably already know this, it's so basic, to just gently mirror back what we are hearing, our empathetic understanding of it. I'm so sorry that that happened. What a huge disappointment. That sounds scary. No wonder you're not able to sleep these days. Or I see how happy you are about this. It's so lovely to see you so happy. But really, we don't need to say much. In fact, there's this old story that I think must get told, some version of, to everybody in their seminary training. It's about this young priest who gets a visit from someone who has a burning issue in their lives, and they are so filled with the storm of what is going on for them that the priest can't get a word in edgewise and eventually gives up and just nods or shakes their head or raises an eyebrow, or maybe makes little noises from time to time, as this person is wrestling and the priest is listening. And as the story has it, when the hour is done, the person gets up to leave, and the priest feels self-conscious and embarrassed about how little they were able to offer this person who is in so much struggle and pain. But at the door, the visitor turns around and says with great emotion, thank you, Pastor, for all that you've helped me with this hour. Now I know what to do." The lesson is told to us designed in fact to teach a truth that is humbling. Not that we don't matter, you and I, but that our mattering can happen differently than maybe we imagined, and to trust that. To trust what simple, connected listening, space, holding of it makes room for. Just that. And there's more to say about good listening. A friend of mine says they feel like they're constantly deepening in their mastery of it, both in their close relationships and even at work, and increasingly feel like it's their superpower and responsible for so much of their success in both areas of their life. When I asked them what they thought helped, they said, "I think people should study the emotions," and reminded me of another friend we know who is a professor of psychology, who said there's a huge controversy in the world of psychology about how many emotions there are. Is it 47 or 87? I can't remember, but 47 is one of the camps because she is in that camp. But whatever it is, it's more than the three that Brené Brown says most of us know: sad, mad, and glad. Those are the ones people can name usually, and not too many more. But it's great to read them all and then to listen to each other, to hear what emotions to mirror back, a way to deepen our practice, to say, I hear you saying you're mad, but I also hear frustration and maybe resentment or hurt. How does that land for you? And to help people name what once you name, you can work through. And we can ask all those questions that ideally we think to that invite further discernment. So what would be the next step for you in trying to answer this question that you're wrestling with? Or who else can you talk to about this? Or what other resources are there to support you? Or what can I do to support you? And not hand out a hat and a scarf and glasses, but whatever they ask for. Companionship in the cave, as the bear wanted in our story this morning. And the learning just keeps going. Ask the therapists among us, and we have many. The parent who stops everything to pull up a stool because someone did that for them can be us, increasingly. Because the old fables, like the one that Carmen read, talk about that intimate listening for another's need and the responding to it as being the key to solving some of life's greatest mysteries and challenges, not just the Grail, but to what heals us and one another. Midwife to grace is this kind of listening, apparently. And we know in our bones, you and I, from the moments we have been held by another in that kind of way, that good listening communicates without words, that someone sees us, really sees us, and hears us, really hears us, and that we matter, and we can get a lot done in this world. We can get through a lot when we're not alone and we know that we matter. So I think it's true, too, you would agree, that a lot that's wrong in the world probably wouldn't happen if we all listened deeply to another. But I don't want to end with that deep and painful point. I'd rather end with one more incentive to deep listening that I was determined to share with you all this morning. My husband and I have a friend we adore who is easily the best listener either of us have ever met, who makes the world go quiet when you're sitting with him, who loves to pull stories out and be with them and asks the best questions to take you onward in your discernment. And we noticed long ago that not only is Peter the best listener we ever knew, but Peter also always had the most confident, good-looking partners. So there's that, too, I throw out there. Listening is seductive, my friends. So we listen, we practice getting better at what that means in our lives. We do it to heal the world. We do it to deepen our connections with each other. We do it to improve our dating lives. We do it to remind ourselves and one another of the most basic truths, which is that we matter, and that shows up in really practical ways, in skills we master, in full, focused presence. So blessings in our practice of listening and the blessing of being listened to. May it heal the world, pull us forward toward beauty and grace. Amen.